Hello and welcome back. Hello. Again, I threw up this picture. I finally found this picture for you guys. If you look very closely on my left shoulder, you'll see someone special hanging out there with me. This will verify my story. If you look very, very carefully right here, you can see my little friend, huh? Yeah. So all kinds of interesting things can happen when we start doing the balance method, right? Very, very interesting things, huh? Okay. Okay, so we're back now. One thing while I'm thinking of it that I want to mention. Hey, all right. Shimmer already is looking for a Cholit Squintle. That's good, huh? Make sure it's a real one though, and not a purebred one, because there are a number of people, unscrupulous people, right? Yeah, there are unscrupulous people who are trying to breed the regular dogs with the Cholit Squintles, and so we have to be careful. You have to ask like for its papers and all of that to make sure that it's really the thing, huh? Yeah, very good. Anyway, one of the things that I am thinking of that I wanted to ask and make sure that Shermo is taken care of with our case study book that's going to be coming out. I hope that along with the case studies, that a lot of the logic, if not all of the logic of whatever the treatments are, is explained in the along with the case study. I think that's very important because last week or in our last class, when our Sherma was gone, then we presented a case study from the academy that was presented as a acupuncture case, and some of the finest minds in balance method could not figure out why the point selection. We understood the channels, but we had some real questions about the point selection there. So sometimes if we are describing what our treatment practices are to other people, we have to think about, especially if it's something like a case study, we have to think about, okay, if people don't understand our logic, we have to explain what our logic is. So that way people in the future who really don't have any connection with us will be able to figure out, they won't have to figure out what our logic was because we've already explained it to them as much as possible. So it's important to be thorough with that stuff. So especially if we're creating something like a book, it'll get into the hands of people who may, pretty much like all of our modern, all the classics that we have now from Chinese medicine, there's nobody around to explain actually what was meant by a lot of those things. So we might think we understand something, but it could turn out that we're on a completely misguided track. And I think frequently that probably is the case. So we want to be careful with any of our assumptions with Chinese medicine, especially when we're reading the classics. In fact, one thing that Sifu Lai taught me, he asked me very specifically to never study the Neijing. I may have told some of you this before. He said, don't study the Neijing because it's actually written in a code. And if you don't know what the code is, then it'll totally screw you up, right? So subsequently, of course, I have gone and I have studied the Neijing. I've gotten a lot out of it, but I always keep that at the back of my mind, like, wow, I don't take any of it as too much of the literal truth, but it's certainly very, it's been very helpful in some of my understandings anyway, at least I think they have been. So, but it's important to keep these things in mind. Anyway, so I hope that some of the logic will be explained in this upcoming book of case studies. It'll make it that much more useful for all of us, even in current times, so we don't have to ask too many questions. Hopefully it'll be there and not just slapped together notes. Okay, I'm sure it's going to be beautiful in any case. All right, okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so we've been focused on Xiaokucao, right? And we will finish with our focus on Xiaokucao, but again, one of the main reasons why I'm doing this is to show the flexibility, all these different ways that we can use the Xiaokucao. Okay, so what if there's liver congestion that isn't allowing food to descend properly, okay? Even that might have been a part of what was happening with our John Maxwell case. Liver congestion isn't allowing the food to descend properly, so it kind of gets hung up in that region. Well, one thing I would think of using right away is HOPO. And I am going to share this. There we go. Okay, so Xiaokucao plus the HOPO. Now again, we're not doubling up on anything here, are we? We're definitely not doubling up. Hang on, let me pull up the chat again in case any of you have some questions that come up. But, okay, but. So there's no direct stacking that's going on here, but we do have a whole bunch of different, well, we have a couple of different synergisms going on between the liver, the large intestine, and the lung. So that's good. It's good strengthening, huh? But then it's tied together with the large intestine, the stomach, and the spleen. And we've got the lung spleen thing happening here, right? So, so this is a combination that we could use. Again, what we are stacking is the bitter and the acrid, and the bitter and the acrid, and we're balancing with the cold and the warm. Okay, so that's going to probably, it all depends on the amounts that we put in, but it could be a coolish formula all up to a slightly warm formula, depending on how we would combine these. Okay, but I would use this for something like liver congestion that isn't allowing food to descend properly. So I would say that this is more, a little bit more for the lower digestion, slightly lower digestion, maybe not all the way at the end, but slightly lower digestion. We tend to use the jika or the jishir for the higher digestion stuff. But this, again, this is just an example. This is the HOPO is gonna pull in that lung and large intestine component much more strongly. So particularly if you have a liver-lung pathology that is involved with this liver congestion that isn't allowing the food to descend properly, that's when we would pull this in. And also there's a lot of spleen and stomach involvement with it as well. Okay, so how about something really different here? How about for something, let's do another combination here. And again, I'm just finding bitter and acrid herbs here because we're stacking bitter and acrid and keeping this liver and gallbladder stuff in mind. What happened? There we go. Sorry. Just trying to get everything aligned here. Boom, there. Okay. Sorry. The zachi is what we're looking at. There we go. Zachi. So Xiaokucao plus the zachi. What's it gonna do? Again, we have we can contrast it with the HOPO. We still have the lung and the large intestine, but rather than doing spleen and stomach, we're going for small intestine here. Okay. So maybe here there could be some kind of swelling, maybe some kind of swelling along the yang aspects of the arms, maybe in the lung channel as well. maybe some swelling in that the medial aspect of the hands and the fingers, huh? Or maybe something like carpal tunnel there in that area, huh? That's caused by that swelling of the sheath. But maybe not the carpal tunnel itself, but maybe these other, some of the other tendons. Oh, like with the thumb and the index finger. More swelling there than with true carpal tunnel. You want to be really careful these days when people say that they have carpal tunnel, because people use the term carpal tunnel for almost any pain in the hand or wrist. And that's not true at all. The true carpal tunnel is only along that pericardium channel, along that particular sheath. So got to be very careful with that diagnosis, okay? All right, so again, with the Ziqi, there's the sweetness, the addition of sweetness is bitter and acrid stacking that we're doing, okay? Remember, sometimes sweet consolidates, sometimes it activates the spleen's power to move water, because that's what we're doing here, because we're talking about that swelling along the yang aspect of the arms, plus maybe along the lung channel, swelling there. Okay, the small intestine is included there. We could take that in a number of different directions, especially when we were including Xiaokucao with some of that heart stuff that we were doing earlier. Ziqi might be able to be a good small intestine synergist in some cases when there's upper jiao stuff. So now every warm interior herb is acrid and bitter except for one, okay? Because it got thrown into that category for no good reason, in my opinion. Even so, it just doesn't make any sense to combine a warm interior herb with Xiaokucao. And that that one is the seed of the one of the peppers. And because the pepper is in that category of the warm interior, they put the seed in, but the seed is actually cold, right? So that's why they did that, okay? So anyway, but it doesn't make any sense to combine a warm interior, any warm interior herb with Xiaokucao, because the functions are just, they're too oppositional, okay? So why would you want to heat up the same channels that you're trying to cool down, okay? So that's another Mingjie rule we might have just discovered there with that. So we could say Xiaokucao is contraindicated to combine with warm interior herbs, okay? So you just think about it. You don't want to heat up and cool down the same channels at the same time. It doesn't make any sense. So even if you're trying to do something fancy with the liver, there are other ways to do it that aren't so oppositional. That's true. Sometimes we use oppositional herbs for balance, but this is a case where it's just, it kind of doesn't make much sense. So it makes a lot more sense to regulate qi instead, okay? So let's do that a little bit. Regulate some qi with Xiaokucao. So we could start off by warming up some of those channels that we're trying to cool down by using the Xiaokucao. We could warm them up a little bit, maybe to balance, huh? Warming a little bit's all right, just to introduce some opposition and moderation, but we don't want them to be like exactly going head to head. And those herbs in the warm interior category are actually hot, okay? And there's a really big difference between hot and warm herbs. They're very, very, very different. So anyway, so here we go. Let's try combining the Xiaokucao with this regulate qi herb. Xiabai. Okay, so it's warm. It's warm. It's also bitter and acrid. It's aromatic, so it's going to give some punch to what we're doing here. Okay. Gives us a little formula, actually, doesn't it? With the liver and the gallbladder, the large intestine and the lungs. That's a little formula. right? Because we've got our hand and foot yang and hand and foot yin. Right, so this would be a great formula for liver and gallbladder heat and stagnation that's seizing and oppressing the chest. Right? Remember, we use that xiabai to regulate the qi in the chest more than anything. Right? So it's that combination of the lung and the stomach more than anything. Even though they say it's primarily a large intestine herb, I think this combination gets things to descend out of the chest. And again, it's because of that acridity and the aromatic quality, it's got that activating quality. And that's why it does that. So this could be an interesting kind of a formula depending on how we mixed it, for heat and stagnation mostly, if we're using a lot of xiaokucao and a little bit of xiabai, right? That heat and stagnation that would be seizing and oppressing the chest. Okay, when do you see that? Like in a lot of panic attacks, many kinds of asthma that's behind it, right? Sometimes people get freaky nosebleeds for no apparent reason. Some of the early stages of some kinds of IBS can have that kind of a pathology. Especially when the people get nervous. Suddenly they get nervous and then suddenly they have to run to the bathroom like that. You could use that combination of the xiabai and the xiaokucao. Okay, here's another one that's very similar in some ways that we could combine. And we'll keep them both up there so we can compare them a little bit. Fo shou, okay. Bitter acrid again, we're sticking with that. Okay, it's also aromatic. It's also warm. Liver, lung, stomach, spleen. Okay, so some differences here. We've got the liver and the spleen with the fo shou. The one reason why the fo shou is so good for helping to regulate those congested emotions and depressions, okay? So it's more on the tai-yin side because of the lung and the spleen. Also, it's this fo shou, more the tai-yin side, okay? So instead of hooking the stomach up to match with the large intestine, it hooks up with the spleen instead, okay? Which also supports the lung because of that Biao Li dynamic, right? Okay, so this combination, we'll take away the xiabai here. This combination of the xiaokucao and the fo shou, okay, that would be good to do something like activate the middle jiao, actually in a couple different ways to support the lungs. Very good to balance certain kinds of moodiness with this one, especially for people who go into catastrophizing, catastrophic thinking, right? This could be very good to help to intervene with that. It cools and dissipates stagnation where we need it to, okay? It supports and activates where we need it to. Right, so we got some interesting synergies. We stacked up the liver here. We got gallbladder combining with the liver, gallbladder combining with the lungs. So a lot of this sense of constriction that can come with these kind of liver qi oppressing the chest, right? A lot of times it'll come through that that tiger relationship between the lung and the gallbladder, like that. And the stomach and spleen are getting regulated here as well, because we got that whole kind of central digestion with the fo shou plus the xiaokucao. And again, this happens a lot. So you also have that liver, spleen, qou, ox branch relationship pretty strongly activated here, with a little more emphasis on the liver, because there's, well, I wouldn't say that. I would kind of say that. It's a little bit of a toss-up, but probably say a little bit more the liver side because we're stacking up the liver versus the spleen, which is only supported by the lung and the stomach. Right. So anyway, it's a little six of one, half dozen of another, but You get that strong CHO-OX relationship between the liver and the spleen, emphasized also with this dynamic. Okay. Let's do some other related combinations. This will pare it down even farther, make it even simpler. It's another one of our citruses. Okay, that's the xiangyuan, right? The citron, those are the big, they look like gigantic grapefruit. You know, they can be huge ones like this, huh? Okay. So that's used for the lung, the spleen, and the liver. So again, we might want to think about this like a tie-in plus liver. You could think about it with the neighbor relationship of the lung and the liver plus the spleen. Or anyway, it's all three of these that are being activated here. Okay, so we could use Xia Ku Cao plus the Xiangyuan, and it would treat a similar kind of thing, this sort of liver qi congestion, maybe with some heat or maybe not, because again, both of these are warm, right? So it could be a kind of an ambiguous heat situation, but that liver qi congestion is oppressing the lungs somehow, okay? With some effects on the digestion for sure. So Posho is going to be a little bit more comprehensive there, and the Xiangyuan is going to be a little bit more pared down, just more focused on that tie-in and with a little bit of the liver. Although the liver is in primary position with the Xiangyuan. So anyway, Xiangyuan is another citrus, okay, supporting the liver more with the sour flavor also. Can't forget the flavors. So we still have bitter acrid, but also Xiangyuan comes in with sour. And so that gives us a combination of nourishing and dispersing, which can be really good to renew a person's qi. Okay, a combination of nourishing and dispersing. Again, that's why a lot of those tonification herbs that people prize so much, they have a combination of nourishing and dispersing qualities inside of them. Right, so those patients who have that liver fire, we can use it for patients that have liver fire, but they're also kind of worn out, like that. Okay. All right. So here's another herb that has virtually the same everything, which is Tumuxiang, right? If you combine these side by side, they're almost identical, but the Tumuxiang does not have the sour quality. It's not said to have the aromatic quality, but it does. It's actually pretty aromatic. Okay, so Dustin asks, would we also say that the Xiangyuan is more gentle at moving the qi as it's dispersing, but also holding with sour flavor? More gentle, yeah, it's actually more gentle than either of these other ones. It's quite gentle actually. Yeah, that sour flavor is part of what's doing that. It's got a certain kind of, I think it depends on how much and where of the plant you use, or more how much of and where of the skin that you use rather. If they take it more from the surface, then it's going to be a lot more activating and a lot warmer, right? Because it's got more of that the actual peel. But remember, there's all that white that's there also with those Xiangyuan, those giant citrons. They're mostly the white stuff that's in there. Okay, so that's kind of blandish, aromatic-ish, a little bit slightly bitter, like that. You know, so again, it depends on where they're pulling it from. But in general, Dustin, I think you're right with that. So that Tumuxiang, again, we're paring it down from all these complicated liver-lung dynamics. Again, liver-lung spleen, okay? Okay, so now we'll swing over, since we just talked about Muxiang, to Muxiang, we'll talk about Muxiang also. Then we're back into some of the complexity of this. Muxiang, okay, it's a very complex set of channel associations, but they're very well balanced, aren't they? We've got gallbladder, we've got sanjiao, we've got large intestine, we've got stomach. So we've got Xiaoyang, Yangming, plus we got the spleen supporting the stomach here. Okay, and we add it plus the Xiaoguicao, will be strongly activating for the liver gallbladder system. Plus, we would say more to the gallbladder side because of that sanjiao, extra sanjiao boost that the gallbladder gets there for the Xiaoyang. Like that. And we're still supporting the spleen and stomach for sure with adding the Muxiang. Okay, so it's regulating Xiaoyang and Yangming plus some extra support for the spleen. That's spleen and stomach, actually, to look at it that way. Right. So again, there's strong emphasis here on regulating the gallbladder qi to help to manage the fire, like we discussed above with that, with those Ben Cao Wen Da insights about the gallbladder being so related with all of the heat regulation. Okay, so let's contrast that combination with one that I would more naturally kind of jump to if I was thinking of Xiaoguicao and emphasizing the gallbladder. I would think of Muxiang for sure. And it's awesome because it's got that sanjiao. But so does Qingpi. So does Qingpi, okay? So it's a little bit, little different emphasis here with a little bit more liver support from that sour taste. Plus we've got an additional liver tropism here. So we've got liver gallbladder, and Muxiang doesn't have that liver tropism, right? But a lot of the same elements that are going on. So Muxiang doesn't have the liver tropism. Qingpi has the liver tropism. Muxiang has the spleen tropism. Qingpi lacks the spleen tropism, right? So that's a good way to look at it. So Muxiang is definitely more on the spleen side. Qingpi is more on the liver gallbladder side. But don't forget, it's got that stomach tropism. So it's not completely ignoring that spleen stomach axis either. Okay. So plus that the liver, stomach, and the sanjiao, that's gonna liver, stomach, sanjiao. That's gonna distal in the pericardium to some degree too, isn't it? Right. So that'll give a strong Jueyin Xiaoyang, actually Jueyin Xiaoyang spin to that combination. So we have to remember: are we distilling in some of these channel associations? You always want to think about that because sometimes you might be just putting herbs together and not necessarily focusing on that, but it could just pop up that, oh, wow, you're actually bringing in something that you either do or don't want to bring in. So we have to look at our formulas multidimensionally in that way, okay, in that respect. So here's another contrast and differentiation. This is good to do. With Qiangfu. Okay, so let's compare and contrast these three herbs. Muxiang, Qingpi, and Xiangfu. Okay, so Xiangfu's got, so it's more to the liver, spleen side. Okay, so this is filling in the gaps that neither of the others. So this has both the liver and the spleen, and sanjiao and the gallbladder. Okay, sanjiao gallbladder with Qingpi, yes. Sanjiao gallbladder with Muxiang, yes. Right, so Xiangfu kind of gives us the best of both worlds, doesn't it? But it doesn't have the stomach. So anyway, you can see how these things can play with each other. Also remember that Xiangfu is a regulate qi herb, but it's regulating qi that's on the verge of becoming blood. This qi that wants to become blood. That's when you really want to use the Xiangfu. Okay, but you can see you can spin it one way or the other with either Qingpi or Muxiang to get the emphasis going more strongly toward the spleen or more strongly toward the stomach if you want. Okay, same kind of ideas, but Xiangfu is more neutral. Okay, so that extra spleen is going to hook up and further support the Sanjiao, actually, if we just look at the Xiangfu on its own. Right, so again, it relates more to the qi that's becoming blood. All right, it's going to support this particular combination of the Xiakucao plus here. Mix these for now. Okay, this particular combination of Xiakucao and the Xiangfu. It's going to support the head to some degree because that Sanjiao and the gallbladder, plus the liver and the spleen actually are supporting the head a lot. Right? That Sanjiao is also going to be supporting the head very strongly. Gallbladder is going to be draining the head to some degree. So it's pretty balanced between the liver supporting the head up, spleen also supporting the head, Sanjiao also because of the way that it comes up into the head and feeds the head. Although the liver and the spleen, we think that they only go up into the chest, but actually the liver goes all the way up to Baihui, doesn't it? And the spleen comes all the way up into the root of the tongue, doesn't it? Like that. So that's what I mean when I say that. And the Sanjiao just plain goes up and around the ears and all that, so it's supporting the head in that way, dumps right in there. Okay. So let's say we're treating our ideal patient here, our ideal Xiakucao patient, and we start to discern from our observation and listening to all the patient's different stories that the reason the liver congestion and heat are happening is because of parasites somewhere in the upper jiao. Parasites somewhere in the upper jiao, right? So we will create a different combination, but first I'm going to answer this question. So someone has a good appetite, no loose stool, but the tongue is pale. So is qi not turning into blood with the Xiangfu? Good appetite, yes. No loose stool, but the tongue is pale. So qi is not turning into blood. Correct, correct. Yeah, that could be a time when you want to add some Xiangfu, for sure, for sure. And also add, if you add some blood tonics, a little bit of blood tonic at that time, along with the Xiangfu, it's going to really help that process. So the body will help to create the blood and then disseminate it quite well. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, we were talking about parasites. Okay. This is interesting because we often don't think of parasites being in the upper jiao, but it can happen for sure. So if that's the case, we've got some of those parasites there. We could address that in a few ways, but one way would be using the changshan, right? Pretty toxic, okay? So we wouldn't want to use a whole lot of it, maybe just a little bit. We also don't want to make them throw up. But there's going to be some good synergies here, and it might help to expel some parasites. And especially, we talked before about the changshan is really interesting because it treats the heart parasites. And that's something we need to address at many different levels. These heart parasites exist in our society, and they exist to some degree in nature as well. But those heart parasites, I can virtually guarantee that some have tried to become your patients if some aren't already patients. Okay? So we have to be careful and protect ourselves from things like that. Okay. But this particular combination is pretty interesting because you can see how every channel is actually connected with at least one other channel. So lung, the liver, and the gallbladder. The heart connects up with the gallbladder nicely. The liver connects with the liver, the lung, the gallbladder, in that way. Okay. And again, we really like Changshan because it addresses heart and lung parasites, and that's very rare. So you don't hear people talking about those heart and lung parasites very often. Okay. But we want to be careful when we're using it because it can be an emetic. So we want to make sure to use a very small dose, especially at first. Maybe add some banxia to help to balance that emetic quality. Unless we can talk the patient into doing a full emetic therapy, which can be very life-changing. So that's a possibility also. If they say, okay, they want to do an emetic therapy, okay, then you can load up on the Changshan a little bit more, just enough to get them strong enough to get them to start throwing up. But again, that's pretty extreme. And not many people choose to do that, which is okay. But sometimes it's the most direct route and the best way. So when that's the case, maybe suggest it to the people. Why not? We'll see how committed they are to getting rid of whatever that evil might be. All right. So what about when general heat stagnation begins turning into hot blood that's stagnating in the liver? And we come back to our old pal. Eugene. Eugene. Like that. Okay, so we stacked up the liver and the gallbladder here. Lung is connecting with the liver and the gallbladder also. The heart's connecting with the gallbladder, both externally and internally. Okay. Actually has all the same synergies as Changshan did, plus we get to stack another gallbladder tropism to reinforce those kind of relationships even farther, all the ones that are related with the gallbladder, like that. And the Eugene is totally non-toxic. So if you don't need to treat the toxin with the toxin, then maybe Eugene is the way to go, okay? That combination of the Eugene and the Xiaogucao would be so good for so many different types of depression, okay? So they say that Eugene unwinds the depression knots, unwinds the depression knots. And again, even all the way back in the Neijing, they use this analogy of knotting. They use that analogy a lot of the knotting and the untying of the knot and the tying of the knots. And that's their description of what happens with the qi, that it's flowing along and all of a sudden it's turning into knots. And that's what the depression is. That's what the anxiety is. So Xiaogucao plus Eugene could be very helpful in releasing and reversing some of those knots. We got liver and gallbladder stacked up, plus the lung and the heart. Right? So lung goes with the liver rather nicely, heart goes with the gallbladder rather nicely. Why not? Okay, very good combination. And I'm just doing a quick scan there to see if it's a formula. No, it's just a combination. Okay. All right. So again, you want to use that for so many different kinds of depression, right? So Eugene, they say, unwinds the depression knots. That's what they call them, depression knots. Okay, and then Bansao Wenda, he says, depression is blood that doesn't harmonize. I really like that. And I think it's true. Depression is blood that does not harmonize. Okay. So remember that U in Eugene that U, that is the U that means depression. So it means it's gold for depression. All right. This U can mean fragrancy also, number of different things, but that U is a very important factor in there. So we can use that. It looks like it's a combination of a hand and a cleaver or something like that. Okay, and so when we talk about Eugene, we also want to talk about another herb that we will be using all the time clinically, because most of us have patients that are in some degree of pain. Okay, so it's so good for treating pain, and most practitioners use it quite indiscriminately for almost any pain syndromes, and it can work in that way, right? So Yanhuso is our primary pain herb if we're just thinking about treating pain. But of course, what is pain? It's congestion of qi, and if the worse the pain gets, it can be turned into congestion of blood and all kinds of things. Start piling up once the qi starts congesting, the blood can pile up, and then all kinds of other toxins and things can pile up. It becomes a mess, right? But we can use the Yanhuso, even though it goes through this channel system, which we might want to sketch out right now, just because we're talking about it. So pull out your paper and your pencils. Let's just do this quickly. Okay, so Yanhuso, interesting, goes through the heart. That's easy to draw. And the liver, that's also easy to draw. Hey, those channels are matching up already. Intersecting. And spleen, okay, so spleen is going to take this thing. So that's going to do a whole armpit thing with the spleen. And then the stomach also. So it's going to bring it down from the top. And down and out the feet. Very interesting. Okay, so Yanhuso, it is our primary pain herb. It's what we use for all different kinds of pain. And there's no shame in using Yanhuso, but what I'm saying is that we want to combine it in all different kinds of ways to get it to go to where we want it to go. That's the important thing. Okay? So I'm including it here because the way the gallbladder hooks up with both the liver and the heart. Okay, so coming back all the way back to that gallbladder idea. Right? So we want to keep Yanhuso always in mind when we're treating pain, and we'll find some way to make these synergisms work to our benefit, okay? Okay, now here's another way we can really pare things down. And get very simple with our combining. And we could put Xiaokucao together with Zirantong. Again, this is kind of an interesting, freaky combination, but why not? We want to emphasize the liver, okay? Again, both bitter and acrid. Okay, so we could say that the Zirantong would take the Xiaokucao a little bit closer to normal. Okay, so most of you know, I guess at least some of you know that Zirantong is a primary herb to help broken bones regenerate. So it's really interesting that it only goes to the liver, huh? You would think if that's what everybody uses it for, you would think naturally it would go to the kidney. But actually it activates and cleans and disperses the liver. Okay, that's our primary organ of regeneration. So I think that's why the Zirantong is used in that way. It's also a mineral, okay, so it has a certain heaviness that's going to work well for rising liver fire in this combination. Okay, so we could easily use it to treat the rising liver fire along with the Xiaokucao. So what about that hot liver congestion is generating phlegm? We started talking about that in a couple different places here. What if that phlegm starts accumulating in the lung? And we would add the Xiaokucao to this, Xuanfuhua. Just like that. That actually gives us an interesting formula, doesn't it? Because we got the large intestine and the lung up there, and we got the liver and the gallbladder and the stomach down there. So that formula is very good for, we see the saltiness there, right? So it's very good for dissolving stuck phlegm. that's getting generated by hot liver stagnation, okay? And so that's for the stuck phlegm. We can dissolve it, that stuck phlegm, from the liver congestion, okay? All right, and if that hot liver gallbladder stagnation is creating phlegm that winds up plugging up the channels in the head, that which happens frequently. You see people get the kind of glassy look in their eyes, or it's almost like they have a film over their eyes, right? Then Xiaoku Cao plus the Dan Nanxing. That would be the way to go. But again, specifically with that phlegm plugging up channels in the head, okay, because the Dan Nanxing has a very strong effect on the head. All right. And we would use that unless your patient is a vegan, okay? And then there are other alternatives. So why can't we use Dan Nanxing in a patient who's a vegan? Is because it's that Xing, but they treat it with the bile, okay? Yeah, it's treated with the bile. So we wouldn't want to give that to a vegan because it'll blow their whole scene, right? So there are other alternatives that we can use, okay? So let's introduce the impossible herb, okay? So I hope you guys all understand a lot of the vegan stuff that's out there is actually some of the most highly processed food on the market. You know, when you think about things like the Impossible Burger and those kinds of things, it was unbelievable how those things come really straight out of a laboratory. So that's not necessarily healthy vegan way to eat, okay? So it's maybe not so good for you, even though they call it vegan, okay? So the vegan alternative to the Dan Nanxing is just to use the treated or the prepared Tian Nanxing, which looks like that. That's the Tian Nanxing. So it's prepared, but it's not prepared with the bile. Look, it has some different qualities, okay? It's actually warm and toxic. It's much more toxic because it doesn't have that bile that is breaking up the poison. Liver, lung, spleen, but no gallbladder on just the regular Tian Nanxing. But that toxicity, it's a lot more toxic, okay? It's warm, which you might need anyway. If the patient's a vegan, they're probably going to have some cold going on, right? But it also lacks that extra gallbladder tropism that's so critical for the clearing the head. Okay? That's a big part of the mechanism of how it works to clear the head. Okay? So is it really a good alternative? Vegan alternative to the Dan Nanxing? I actually don't think it's that great an alternative because of the toxicity and all these other things that we're mentioning. I think it's ethically important if people are vegetarians or vegans not to include any animal products in their formulas. That's really, really important because that's a big deal for people, and it might be a bigger deal for them than it is for you, but still you need to respect that. I think that's really important. But always ask them, even if they're vegans, right? Ask them if it's okay to put insects into their formula, okay? Because as Ming Jie practitioners, we're very fond of using insects, aren't we, right? All right, and a lot of times the vegans will tell you, no, nothing with eyes. No, I can't eat anything that has eyes, okay? So that's fine. If you're following their whole line of reasoning that they don't want to have anything with eyes, right, then that means you can be totally free to give them things like leeches and earthworms and sea cucumbers because they don't have eyes, right? But that would be being tricky, and still you'd be tricking them, and they'd probably still blow a gasket, as vegans often do, okay? So what is the best vegan, truly vegan alternative that's non-toxic to Dan Nanxing would probably be this, another very common herb that you should be able to find pretty much anywhere. That is qianhu. Okay, qianhu. Okay, so originally, looking at liver, lung, and spleen, Dan Nanxing, the Dan Nanxing, the bile-treated one, liver, lung, spleen, plus the gallbladder. Remember, we dropped the gallbladder with the regular Nanxing, okay, Tian Nanxing rather. So now the qianhu, also bitter and acrid. Okay, these are all bitter and acrid. Dan Nanxing is slightly acrid, so that bile is modifying the acridity, okay? Because there's no bile in the Tian Nanxing, it's very acrid, okay? But qianhu is just bitter and acrid, okay? So we don't have any of these like sort of extremes going on with it. It'll transform phlegm in the head pretty well, lung, liver, and those gallbladder channels, all right? Okay. So it's simple, you don't need to put anybody at risk. You don't need to tell a white lie by putting worms and leeches into their formula, anything like that, okay? And let's see. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break here, and we're gonna keep riding this one. Okay, I'll see you in 5.